Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with shape tweening. And what we're going to be using is our toolbar over here. We're going to be using our basic shapes. We're going to be referencing this. We're going to be referencing our stroke color and our fill color as well. So I'm going to go ahead and change my fill color because I don't want it to be white because my stage is white right now. So by selecting here, I can come down here and select another color. So I got a fill of red, a stroke of green. I'm going to draw that out first so you can see what it looks like. Normally I don't like to work with strokes, but I want you to see what a stroke will do. So if I draw this on my stage, I'm going to zoom in here for you so you can see it better. I have my shape with a fill, which I'm selecting right now, which is the red. Now shapes and strokes are two separate objects in Flash. Kind of bizarre, but that's how Flash works. So if I select my shape, you can see that I have this white dotted pattern. That's an indicator that in Flash we're working with a shape right now. So if you ever select something and it has this white dotted pattern on it, it's the shape you're working with. Now let me show you the stroke. I'm going to go ahead and highlight my stroke here really quick. I'm going to come over to my properties and adjust the size of the stroke. Again, remember, whatever you select in a program, you can adjust in your properties panel. I'm going to make the stroke a little bit bigger so you can see it. So again, I click my stroke and there's a white dotted pattern here. But the interesting thing about stroke, if I click one side of this object, this is the only side that's being selected right now. Again, if I select over here, it's just this right side. Over here, just this left side. If I want to select this whole stroke as one solid image, I have to double click on it, and then the whole thing will be selected. But again, I don't like working with strokes, so I'm going to go ahead and hit delete. And what I would recommend you guys do is just turn your stroke off like this. That way you don't have to worry about it, because when you start animating Flash, strokes kind of get in the way. They're great when you're creating characters and doing cool design elements, but when you want to animate in Flash, strokes just cause problems. So stay away from them and work with a solid shape. So here we are, we have our solid shape. Now the cool thing about shapes are, well, first of all, let me draw your attention to this. When I drew this shape on my stage, look down here in your timeline. It's no longer a blank keyframe. It was white before with an empty circle. Now it's gray with a black circle. This is an indicator that there is an object placed on the stage on this keyframe at this point of the timeline. That's very important to know, so we'll reference that again here in a second. Now back to the shape. Now again, remember, when you click a shape, you get the white dot pattern. But the cool thing about shapes are you can warp them and create different shapes out of them. So if I roll over the side of my square here, look at my arrow tool. It's getting a curved line next to it. What that curved line is an indicator of, if I click with my mouse and pull, I can warp this square into another shape. Again, if I go over a corner, it gives me a right angle and I can push it in. Again, come over here, get a curve and pull it in. Again, at each angle I get a right angle, and I can create sort of a custom shape here. I'm just kind of creating an arbitrary shape, nothing too exciting. But Flash is great for creating custom shapes to create logos and objects you want to work with. And another cool thing about shapes is if I were to draw another shape on my stage that's the exact same color red and draw it on top of my other red object and then select, look what happened. Because these two objects are drawn on the same keyframe and they're the exact same color, the shapes join and merge into one solid shape. On the contrary, if I were to select a different color like blue, let me grab this oval here and draw that on top of these objects and then select my blue and move it, look what happens. It cuts out the oval shape off the red. So again, similar colors on the same keyframe will merge, and then opposite colors or different colors on the same keyframe will subtract. Oh, I have to click off it first. Click off, select again, and move it. You see that? A great way for creating custom shapes and custom objects you want to work with. But what I want to do now is I want to animate this one of these shapes. I don't want to animate both of them. If I were to animate both of them, I would want to create another layer here to work with two different shapes. Rule of thumb in Flash, always animate each object on its own layer. And we're going to do that right now. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this red and I'm going to work with this blue right now. I'm going to grab my magnifying glass and zoom out so you can see my stage a little bit better. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with my object right here. So about half of it is on the stage, and I'm going to animate it across the stage. So I'm going to come down here to my timeline, and I want this to be a 1-second animation. So I'm going to come down here to frame 30, select, and then I'm going to come up here to my menus, select Insert, Timeline, Enter Keyframe. Now what just happened here by doing that is it duplicated this keyframe, placed it right here, so I have a duplicate of this object. Now the interesting thing is each keyframe represents an object at a certain place in time on the timeline. So right here I have this shape, which is referenced by this keyframe. Down here on frame 30 I have this shape referenced by this keyframe. So if I were to move this across the stage, on frame 30 this shape will be right here. On frame 1 this shape will be right here. So I have the basics of my animation. To create any animation in Flash you need 2 keyframes, a beginning point and an end point. And then once you've done that, you select between the 2 keyframes, come up here to Insert, and select Shape Tween because we're working with a shape. Once you've done that, if you look down at your timeline again, you'll notice that your timeline has now changed. There's an arrow pointing to the right, referencing motion, and again the color changed from gray to this light green color. So if you're to hit return on your keyboard, you can see your shape animate across the stage. Very simple, very easy. But that's not the real power of shape tweens. The cool thing about shape tweens is you can warp one shape into another. So what I'm going to do is come down here to frame 30, select that keyframe and hit delete. Notice as I hit delete, my tween broke down here. It no longer has an arrow suggesting motion. It has a broken line suggesting that this tween or this animation no longer exists. But I have a blank keyframe now that I'm going to select. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select a rectangle and draw a rectangle on my stage. And then I'm going to hit return. You'll notice that before I hit return that the keyframe came back on. My broken tween is fixed now. It's no longer broken. So I'll hit return, and what I have is I have an oval shape warping into a square or a rectangle shape. And then I can get really wild and really warp this out a little bit and create something really funky like so. Hit return. It doesn't matter what the shape is, a shape can warp into any other shape. Remember, to know if you're working with a shape, you either draw with a shape object and then select on the object on the stage, and if it gets the white dotted pattern, it is a shape. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the color of this final shape to, let's say, an orange. Now my starting color was blue, so I'm going to go from a blue to an orange, and you can see that what's happening is that not only is it warping from one shape to another shape, it's warping from one color to another color. So shapes are pretty cool, they're fun to work with, and they're pretty easy to animate, and that is how we animate a shape tween.